Mitch Steele joins me this week to discuss brewing lagers and craft brewing supply chains. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 253. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 253, and it's early March 2022. Mitch Steele joins me this week to discuss lagers and craft beer brewing supply chains. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And also the Brew Commander, the new brewhouse controller from Blickman Engineering. It's available in electric and gas propane models. The patent-pending Brew Commander is a high-quality brewhouse controller that offers automated step mashing, boil timers, precision temperature control, and advanced settings. Command your brew day with the new Brew Commander. To order yours today, visit blickmanengineering.com. Again, that's blickmanengineering.com. And our web-based version of BeerSmith is available now at beersmithrecipes.com. BeerSmith for the web lets you build, edit, and brew recipes from any browser, including your desktop, tablet, or mobile device. The new web-based version gives you access to tens of thousands of recipes, online recipe editing, advanced water tools, and much more from any device. I've also added new shopping list and inventory tools now to the web-based version. You can try BeerSmith Web for 30 days by setting up an account at beersmithrecipes.com. If you purchase a Gold, Platinum, or Pro license, you get both BeerSmith Web and the desktop version for one low price. Check out beersmithrecipes.com now to give BeerSmith Web a try. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, my guest is Mitch Steele. Mitch wrote the book on IPAs called IPAs, Brewing Techniques and the Evolution of India Pale Ale. Mitch is COO and brewmaster at New Realm Brewing Company, formerly the brewmaster at Stone. Mitch holds a degree in fermentation science from the University of California at Davis. Mitch, great to have you back on the show. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Brad. Good to be here. Thanks.
How are things at New Realm? You mentioned you got a couple new projects in the works.
Yeah, so this past year we opened up two new locations. We opened up in Savannah, Georgia, and that's primarily a distillery. And then we opened up in Charleston, South Carolina. We took over an existing brew pub on Daniel Island. So the last year has been really busy. We're getting into distilling in a big way. And then we've got a new location, a new brewery location that we hope to open by the end of the year in Greenville, South Carolina, which we're super excited about.
Wow. So how many locations do you have now? I know the main, you started in Atlanta, of course, and then you expanded, I'm trying to think, to South Carolina, if I recall.
Virginia Beach. Yeah, we took over the Green Flash Brewery in Virginia Beach when it was shut down by the banks, and we were able to bid on it. And that's become our main production brewery. Atlanta's still running strong. Typically, what we do in Atlanta is mostly innovation work. And then also we have a number of beers that we do just for our restaurants, and we tend to brew those here in Atlanta as well.
And I didn't know you got into distilling as well, you mentioned.
Yeah, that was kind of a new thing. It was interesting. What happened was we have this huge restaurant in Atlanta, and a lot of the revenue that we are budgeting for coming out of that restaurant is from events. Mm-hmm. And Georgia beer law does not allow you to serve anything in a production brewery tap room besides what's made on premise. And so we could not bring in spirits or wine or anything like that to serve in our restaurant in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up going out and getting a distilling permit for the Atlanta location. And we've been bringing in bulk spirits and blending them and aging them and then bottling them and then just sending the bottles over to the restaurants so they can do some cocktail work and provide spirits to people who may not like beer. And it's been huge for us. And so when the opportunity came up for Savannah, that distillery had been shut down for probably a year and a half when we first took a look at it, and we just fell in love with the building, the location, and the distillery is super nice. It's a fully automated distillery from a company in Hungary, which I thought was really interesting, but it's all copper and just is gorgeous.
Wow. That sounds really cool. So how many locations do you have total then?
So we have 4 right now, and we are opening a 5th hopefully this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty busy. So
Yep.
when I last had you on, I think it was late 2020, we talked a little bit about seltzers. Has the seltzer boom still going, or has it started to wane a bit?
Well, I think for smaller brewers, it's started to tail off pretty
Yeah.
significantly, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I think the biggest reason is that the big seltzer producers are flooding the market with all sorts of new varieties and new flavors. They can do it at a lower uh, price than what a craft brewer can do it at,
Hmm.
and there's only so much room on the shelves and only so much room at distributors. So the um, the seltzer thing for us specifically has tailed off in distribution. We still have a little bit of distribution, but it does very well in our restaurants. So we're continuing to make seltzers
Mm-hmm.
just at a smaller scale.
I was talking to the folks from White Labs about seltzers, and they said there's a lot of people making super concentrated seltzers to start with, and then they dilute them down when they actually go into production. Are you doing anything like that?
Yeah, to some extent, we're brewing to about
Very high gravity.
yeah, not real high. We haven't really tested it out, like doing 25 degrees Plato or anything like that. I know we've talked to some seltzer makers that do that. I think ours caps out at maybe 15 or 16 Plato, so it's
Hmm.
about 8%, and then we dilute it, almost 50% with deaerated water
Hmm.
when it comes time to process it.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. We were having a discussion. You get into really high gravities, you have to worry about like osmotic shock and all kinds of things like that. But
Yeah, yeah, it gets kind of tricky, and that's why honestly, that's why we haven't pursued it to any great level, just because what we were doing was working, and
that's
and
awesome.
having the resources to do some testing on some of the higher gravity stuff, we just haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah. And we also discussed enzymes to make low calorie beers. Are you still in the low calorie beer business as well?
Yeah, we came out with a beer last year called Below IPA that was less than 100 calories and like 3 grams of carbs, and we used the the amylase enzyme in the brew house for that, and it worked really well. And by all accounts, everybody who tried the beer really liked it. But we took a chance and put it into some radical packaging, a sleek can, and
Huh.
a label that had nothing similar to any other previous New Realm labels, and it didn't take off like we hoped it would.
No.
And and so I still want to brew the beer, probably on a infrequent basis, maybe in the summertime or things like that, because I still believe in the beer, and I think everybody in the company does. We're very happy with the way the beer turned out. It's just it was a tough sell. Again, it's a distribution thing. If the distributors are interested and they think it has legs, then that tends to help with its success. And if the distributors are kind of apathetic towards it, it's got no chance.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, does it sell well through the tap room or no?
It depends on the tap room for us. Every tap room is very different. It does better in Virginia than it does in Atlanta, for
Hmm.
example, which surprises me, but also doesn't, because Atlanta is more of a hotbed for seltzers and cocktails than Virginia Beach is. So, I think Virginia Beach is more beer focused, and Atlanta is more focused on a mix of beverages.
Yeah, I could see that. It's certainly Virginia Beach is a tourist destination, really.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of military there as well, and they tend to like their beer, and which has been really cool.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I was in the Air Force, so and I like
Okay.
my beer, so
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we get a lot of folks that are either serving or have served, and they're veterans, and they come in and they like their German beers, which is really kind of fun.
yeah. Well, today you wanted to discuss the rise of craft lagers, which is interesting to me. Outside of maybe some of the German and continental lager styles, most of us don't associate lagers with craft brewing.
Yeah, it's I remember when I started in craft beer, I think Stouts in Pennsylvania was probably the only one I knew of that was doing lagers. And then Gordon Biersch opened up in, I believe it was 1988 or 89, and that was right when I was getting started. And they knocked people's socks off in the Bay Area because they were the first small brewery to be doing lagers exclusively, and they really were out. They were thinking out of the box there, and did something that nobody had done before. But, we've been hearing for a long time from beer experts and consultants and the Brewers Association folks that beer drinkers are gravitating towards lighter beers and lower hop beers, and lagers are a part of that trend. And, for a number of years, brewers have been saying Pilsner is going to be the next big thing, and that really hasn't happened. But the one thing that I am seeing is that there are a lot of craft brewers that are doing lagers on a regular basis, and it's kind of a nice development. And it used to be when I went into a craft brewery that I've never been into before, and I went into their tap room, I would opt for their IPA or a pale ale, and now if I see they have a Pilsner, that's what I go for first, and which is kind of fun, And it's brewers themselves love the Pilsner style, and we kind of use it as a basis to gauge whether the brewery's a good quality brewer or not, and so if you go in and you get a Pilsner and it's pretty good, chances are the rest of their beers are going to be really good too.
Yeah, I've been to a few where you just get a beautiful Pilsner served in the nice tall glass, and really hard to beat, honestly.
Yeah, it's actually we started off with a German Pilsner. It was kind of a North German Pils when we started. It was about 40 IBUs. I was really inspired by Victory's Prima Pils, with our beer, which we call Euphonia Pilsner. And over time, we've dropped the bitterness back down to more kind of Southern German levels, around 30, but it still has a good floral hop character to it, and it's got a good hop presence. So it's one of my favorite beers that we do.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you: is what lager styles have you started to brew, and which ones are really the most popular?
Yeah, so the Euphonia is probably the most popular. It's one of the few Pilsners, or it's one of the few beers that we've been able to get permanent tap.
Is that a Czech style Pilsner or a German?
It's a German
style Pilsner.
Yeah, it's and it's all German ingredients, German yeast, German hops, and it's probably our second or third best selling beer at this point. When we started. Very early on, we did a 5-barrel pilot batch of a Munich Dunkel, and that sold out in like 3 days.
Wow.
in our restaurant in Atlanta, and we've been brewing it ever since. And that's been a really, really positive one for our portfolio in the restaurants, and especially in a place like Virginia Beach, where you get the folks who've spent a lot of time in Germany coming in, and they ordered the beer. And so for a few years, it was in our top 5 consistently. It's dropped out a little bit now, but it's still in our top 10 week after week in our restaurants. So we're going to keep brewing that one. That's a wonderful beer. And then we started doing in Oktoberfest, a Märzen style Oktoberfest a couple of years ago, and that beer is called Bavarian Prince, and that has been one of the most popular seasonal beers that we've done. So we're having fun with the lager side of things, and we've brewed some Italian Pilsners, we've done some light alcohol lagers and things like that, but the Euphonia German Pilsner and the Munich Dunkel and the Bavarian Prince Oktoberfest are the beers that really have become big hitters for us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, obviously with a lager, any tiny flaw is quickly exposed. How have you had to adapt, perhaps, to brew some of the high quality lagers at New Realm?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's why brewers, I think, when they find a good lager, they really appreciate it. Um, I think there's a couple things that stand out in how we developed our lagers. The first is picking the right yeast. Different, every yeast strain behaves differently and produces different flavors. We ended up trialing 3 different lager yeasts before we settled on the Weihenstephan 3470 strain for most of our lagers.
Hmm.
And that's one that gives us what we think is the most authentic flavor. The Augustiner lager yeast was also really, really good for us as well. So, but I think picking the right yeast is important. Picking a German origin yeast if you're going to make a German style lager is important. And then the other thing is temperature control. That's really probably the biggest thing that I see where people struggle with making lagers is not being able to maintain a cool fermentation temperature and a lagering temperature that'll hold for a while. And certainly when I was home brewing and I didn't have temperature control and I tried to brew lagers, they came out okay, but they came out kind of fruity and kind of ale-like. And they were great drinking beers, but they weren't really representative of the styles that I was trying to brew. And so I think the temperature management piece of it is really critical.
So what kind of a temperature profile are you using in fermentation?
So typically 50 to 55 degrees for the primary, and then we do a diacetyl rest, and then we do a multi-stage chill down to about 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and we chill it slowly. So
it's not a cold crash, huh?
It's not a cold crash at all. It's a very measured drop in temperature, and the idea there is to keep the yeast somewhat active and actively maturing the taste of the beer. So, and this was, and I'd never really done that before. That was a technique that our first head brewer in Atlanta brought with him from Sierra Nevada.
Interesting. And are you doing a separate mash profile, a different mash profile? Are you going with a traditional like barbell approach where you hit the low temperature and the high temperature, or?
We have, but we don't do it on a regular basis. I mean, even the German malts are coming in so well modified anymore that we just do an upward infusion, and that seems to work. And we just adjust the temperatures to where we think is going to make the best beer. But yeah, it's been. We haven't done anything with decoction or anything like that, which I know, if you get into some real hardcore lager brewers, they swear by decoction, but decoction's great, but it's also a real pain in the ass in a production brewery. So
I can't imagine doing it in a production scale. It's a mess at a homebrew scale.
Yeah, right. It's not easy.
But yeah, I like Gordon Strong's a big fan of that double end thing where you kind of hit a low temperature in the mash and then a high temperature in the mash, and it gives you a little bit better attenuation, maybe a little bit of maltiness, but.
And I think that's valid. We just haven't practiced that a lot here. Yeah.
And how long does it take to produce a lager? Obviously, lagers take longer, so I was wondering how long it takes you to get one out the door.
Yeah, most of our lagers are about 30-day beers. They're about 28 days in fermentation and aging, and then a day or two on either side for brewing and processing and packaging.
Yeah, so that's quite a bit longer than an ale, obviously, right?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge about doing so many of them is you start to run out of tank space because those beers are sitting in there double the time.
And obviously, what are some of the big challenges you've run into brewing lagers? Have you had any real disasters?
No, we haven't. I think probably the biggest thing that we had was we a couple of our lagers, we do a lot of whirlpool hopping. And we were getting better utilization off of our whirlpool than we thought we were going to get. And so, our very first Pilsner, I think, came in at 50 IBUs, which is a bit high.
Yeah, that's
and it turned a lot of people
off IPA.
Our restaurant. Yeah, it's getting into that territory, isn't it? And that was probably the biggest mess up that we've had. But I think yeast management is tough with lagers because if you're not on a regular brewing schedule, then you have to get fresh yeast, and if you're on a regular brewing schedule, you've got to time it just right so the yeast is ready to pull off the first fermenter and so you can pitch it to the next one. So, just adjusting the timing in a very busy brew schedule has been a bit of a challenge for those
So,
beers.
somebody asked me this question the other day, and I was thinking I didn't have a really good answer. But when is the best time to pull yeast if you want to reuse it?
Yeah, so we don't like to go too far into the aging. Sometimes we'll pull yeast right before we start chilling, because the lager yeast does settle out pretty well, and sometimes it's a week into the chill process. But we always do a true dump first, and then pull the yeast, and
So shortly after you're done with your active fermentation, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, after you get through
that's what I
diacetyl
told
press.
them. So
Yeah. You don't want to let it sit too long, because then the yeast can start, developing some weird flavor characteristics and things like that. So you got to get it off at a reasonable amount of time. In, throughout the lagering process, you want a little bit of yeast in suspension, but you don't need all the yeast that's sitting at the bottom of the cone.
And you mentioned you have a pilot brewery that you work on. I assume where you're developing some of these new beers.
Yeah, we have a 5-barrel SS brewing technology system in Atlanta. And then Charleston, the brewery we took over, has a 7-barrel system. So we're using both of those for some innovation work.
Do you have any tips for homebrewers looking to brew a great lager at home?
Yeah, I think what I talked about earlier, using authentic ingredients. And that being said, I will say that we have found some very nice authentic Pilsner malts that are grown and malted in the United States, and that's been really nice, especially with some of the problems with getting malt from Germany. But I think if you're going to brew a lager at home, use a German yeast strain, use German malts, or the closest thing you can get to German malts, German hops, and or Czech hops, or whatever, some sort of noble hop, and then have temperature control. Be able to control the temperature while you're fermenting. If you're fermenting in a carboy, or if you have a small stainless tank that's got some sort of cooling on it, that's going to be your friend.
And you haven't got into doing adjunct lagers or any of the other popular styles yet?
I did forget to mention that we have an American lager called United Craft Lager, and that is a beer that we've been brewing for a couple of years, and that's got a small amount of corn, flake corn in it. But other than that, the inspiration there is back in my time at Anheuser-Busch, when we were brewing Michelob, and Michelob was when it was at its peak. In the 80s, it was a wonderful beer. It had a lot of hop character. It was all malt, and then it
was at the time kind of a premium beer, right?
It really was, and I don't even know if AB's InBev is brewing Michelob anymore. I know they're really focused on Mich Ultra, but I used to love the old Michelob, and over time they started adding some adjuncts to it and things like that, but it was always a really nice German, French, Czech hop representation in that beer. And so with United Craft Lager, we wanted to make something that had that kind of vibe to it. And I think it's been a really good beer for us. There are a lot of people that like it. Again, it's one of those ones that's more of a tough sell in distribution, but very popular in our restaurants. So we keep brewing it.
Well, since you wrote the book on IPAs, I have to ask, what's the latest on the IPA craze? Is it still hazy IPAs the popular thing, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, everybody that we talk to in the industry is telling us that hazy IPAs are still going to be a thing, the big thing for a while, for the near future, the next few years. Couple of things that I'm seeing though with India Pale Ales, and I don't know if this has gotten into like IRI data yet, so I don't know if the consultants have really latched onto this yet. But we are seeing some increased buzz about West Coast IPAs coming back, and people drinking clear IPAs again. So we don't want to stop brewing those beers. either, and we're doing hazy IPAs, and we've got a couple of more West Coast style IPAs, and they're all great beers. We're all really happy with them, but the hazy IPAs, the ones that's selling.
Is that the top selling IPA at the moment?
For us, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and an IPA is going to be the number one style category for craft beer for a long time. I think
Uh,
nobody thinks anything's going to come and replace
I
that.
think it's more than half of the beer, right, is IPAs now, right?
Yeah. And you've lost pale ales because of it. Nobody's brewing pale ales anymore, which is a bit of a drag. But it's here to stay. I think. I think one of the things that I'm finding interesting is the whole cold IPA thing.
So what
And
explain that to me. I'm not familiar with the cold IPAs.
so cold IPA, there was a brewer at Wayfinder in Oregon who created this beer, and he named it cold IPA. And I the beer itself, the way people are brewing it, it's kind of a hybrid between an American lager and an IPA.
Hmm.
And to that end, the grain bills typically have 10 to 20% adjunct grain, and then the bitterness is lower, more in the 20 to 30 range, but it is dry hopped, so you get that dry hop character, but it also drinks fairly clean and crisp. And this is a style that I first learned about a couple of years ago, and we had Sean O'Sullivan from 21st Amendment come out and brew one with us that we called Rice Cold IPA,
Hmm.
and it had flaked rice in it, and it was a good beer. It really came out nice. And then they kind of fell off the radar for a while, but right now I'm seeing a lot of brewers in Georgia making them,
Hmm.
and I think that's kind of neat. They're kind of this hybrid style, so they're not as incredibly bitter. They're not bracing on the palate. They're clean, they're crisp, but they have some real nice dry hop character as well.
Interesting. I haven't had one of those yet, so I'll have to start looking for them.
And they're usually fermented with a lager yeast. So a lot of people call them, they're just IPLs, which I don't agree with. An IPL is, in my mind, is 6 to 7% alcohol and hopped with, traditional IPA hops. And
Uh-huh.
a cold IPA is typically dry hopped with something a little different, not an aggressive C hop or anything like that. I know Cashmere's been a popular one.
Hmm.
The uh, uh, gosh, what's the Hallertau Blanc
Oh yeah,
was,
yeah.
yeah, was one of the real popular hops in it when it first started. So, people were kind of going for that wine-like character out of the hops, and not going for this huge over-the-top pine and citrus thing.
Hmm. Well, another topic you wanted to discuss was supply chain woes. Clearly, we're all facing supply chain issues, even at home, and inflation's hitting everybody as well. But
Sure is.
I think you said on the panel, what specifically is happening to the craft beer industry as a whole?
Yeah, so this really kind of hit during COVID, and there are supply chain issues with everything that breweries are buying, with
Wow.
the exception of hops. Probably there's a surplus of hops right now available. They just might not be the varieties that people want, but there are hops out there.
Mm-hmm.
When COVID hit and all the when the lockdown happened and all the restaurants shut down and the bars shut down and everything,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of brewers had to transition to packaged product to make it through the period,
Yeah, a
and
ton of people put in canning lines and such. Yeah.
yeah, and our packaging mix went from about 45 to 50% cans to 80 to 85% cans during that stretch,
Right.
which is a lot of cans. And at the same time, what was happening was, the energy drinks were really starting to take off, and seltzers were really starting to take off, and RTD cocktails were just grabbing hold, and so bottom line, there weren't enough cans being made in the United States to supply the needs of the brewers and everybody else. And so that was the first shortage that hit with the supply chain issues, was aluminum and aluminum cans. And it's continued on for a couple of years.
Is that the reason why the price of soda's more than doubled?
Yeah, it might be part of it. Definitely. I know. I'm assuming that those soda makers have long-term contracts with cans, but it's the price of aluminum is going up. The price of everything is going up, like you mentioned, and a lot of brewers have had to get their cans from other countries, which led to some unexpected situations with bad can liners that don't react well to acidic beverages. In some of these liners, everybody's reformulating their can liners because of the California Prop 65 and
because cans most people don't know, but cans are plastic lined, right?
Yeah, and it was a compound called BPA that was creating all the concern, because it's been determined to be a potential cancer agent, and so a lot of the can companies, well, all of them, are reformulating their liners, and some of these reformulations didn't sit well with kettle sour beers or seltzers or ready to drink cocktails, and the liners would degrade after the product was canned and create all sorts of weird off flavors. And so one of the problems with this is that the brewers don't really have a conduit with the can manufacturers to understand what's in the liner material and what it is and whether it's been changing or things like that. And so one of the things we're doing with the Brewers Association Supply Chain Subcommittee is trying to create this back and forth communication process with manufacturers like Crown and Ball so that we can pass on to the brewers and the membership of the BA what's happening with liners and how to get them tested, and whether the can supplier will test, because a couple of them have offered to test once you fill, and that kind of thing. So combined with a shortage, then people are going out and they're buying cans from China or Southeast Asia or something like that, and they don't have the information they need to make a good decision as to whether that can is compatible with what they're putting in it.
Wow. And so go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's been the biggest supply chain issue over the last couple of years.
Yeah. But I assume you're having trouble with ingredients as well, no?
Yeah. Shipping has been a problem for everything, and lead times have doubled for most things that we buy. I know there were some issues with available containers, and that was impeding the flow of German malts to the United States. And it's cardboard. The price has gone up, but shipping has been probably the biggest factor. And
shipping is in many cases doubled, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we certainly are seeing it has been doubled, and we're shipping out 4 to 5 loads a week to distributors and to our other breweries. And, our shipping costs have gone from, somewhere around $3,000 to $4,000 a week to close to $10,000 a week. Wow. Just to get the beer from one place to another. And it's just absolutely insane.
I have a friend who's in manufacturing. He told me that the cost of shipping a container from China went from something like $3,000 to nearly $20,000, I think.
Yeah. Shipping from China has gotten really tough. And then it takes forever to clear customs because of all the problems they're having in the ports and everything. And it's huge. It's a huge issue for a lot of breweries right now.
And I have to ask, obviously, probably on the equipment side, a lot of the equipment comes from China, I assume.
Yep. Yeah.
So I assume you're having trouble getting, although there's probably some equipment freed up by, there a number of breweries did go broke during COVID, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can order equipment from China and have it ready to ship pretty quickly, and then it's the shipping process that really holds things up, and the costs. One of the reasons that a lot of brewers went to China to look for equipment was the price, the manufacturing cost was so much less, but now that's being kind of negated by the shipping cost increases.
And have there been a lot of breweries that have gone out of business? I would assume some of them did not survive COVID. I know I've heard from some.
Yeah, I don't think it's as high as a lot of people thought it might be, which is
Hmm.
good. A lot of breweries found ways to survive during COVID. Like I said, a lot of them started packaging more beer. Not every state had really intense restrictions on bringing people back into their tap rooms. Um, we all just kind of managed to make it work and limp through 2020, and then 2021 was started off with a bang, and then COVID started coming back and it slowed down. So I think really the biggest issue right now is we don't know what's gonna happen in the future, and if there's going to be another resurgence of this virus that causes people to stop going out again.
Yeah, I know there's supposedly a breakout in China again or something like that right now. But
Yeah, I heard Hong Kong this morning, or and it's not going away. Hopefully the vaccinations and people are getting through it okay. But it's a tough thing to try and manage when you're trying to predict what you want to budget for your business.
yeah. And how has general inflation affected you? You mentioned shipping prices quite a bit, but I assume most ingredients and other supplies have gone up as well.
Yeah, malt has been a big one, and the barley malt crop in 2021 was abysmal, and
Wow.
that was due to really extreme drought conditions in the barley growing regions in the Midwest. So like the Dakotas, Minnesota, and then up through Canada, they suffered through an extreme heat wave early in the growing season that damaged a lot of the plants,
Hmm.
and then drought. And so the barley crop, I remember reading a quote that it was the worst crop they'd had in like 40 years.
Wow.
And barley prices at malt prices went up. Oh gosh, almost 20%.
Wow.
And that happened just overnight. So all of a sudden, when we're paying 31 cents a pound for malt, and then it goes up to, the quotes we're getting are 37, 38 cents a pound. That's brutal, and unexpected as well. And I'm hearing that the drought conditions are continuing. So unless those areas get some pretty significant rain over the next few months, it might be a problem again this coming year. Um, Hop prices just have kind of kept pace with everything. We're not seeing massive inflation on hop pricing, except if you're doing some spot buys of really high demand varieties, like the Australian hops or New Zealand hops or something
Hmm.
like that. I read or I heard last week that the price of nickel went up 76%. Um, in a day, and that it immediately impacted the cost of stainless steel for equipment, for kegs. We're dealing with that right now. So
Wow, I
that,
hadn't thought about that. Yeah, there was
yeah,
I can't remember. It was a Chinese investor that was kind of broke the market there. It looked like, right?
yeah. So it's I mean, we're shopping for kegs right now, and when you're a brewery and you're buying new kegs, you're paying, typically you're paying anywhere from 80 to 100 to $110 a keg
Hmm.
for a half barrel, and yeah, the price is a lot higher than that right now. So that's really
Wow.
really creating some issues for a lot of folks.
Now, do you guys negotiate multi-year contracts for things like ingredients?
Yeah, we do. We've been going year to year contracts on malt.
Hmm.
We're thinking about going multi-year, but the reason I haven't looked into that real hard yet is because I don't know how much beer we're going to be selling. But we did get into a process that we're looking at that over the course of the next year or so with malt. With hops, I tend to contract out 2 to 3 years in advance, but I don't try to contract the full amount we're going to need until real late in the game. So
Hmm.
we'll get some on contract. So I've got some 2022, 2023 contracts right now that are probably about 50% of what we're going to need, but I can make adjustments to those as long as they're made before the planting season in the spring.
So with all this happening, have you had to raise your prices yet in response to, all the input prices going up so much?
Yeah, a lot of breweries are doing that, and we're looking at it. Yeah. It's just with the current pricing, it's really hard to make any money, especially if your beer's going into distribution and they're taking 30% of the margin.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, much better to sell it through the tap room, but you can't sell it all through the tap room, right?
Yeah, and that's honestly, that's one of the reasons why we've been starting to get pretty aggressive about opening new tap rooms, because that's the revenue we get from beer sales across the bar is a huge part of our business.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Where do you think craft beer brewing is headed next?
I wish I knew. I think we've all, every time I talk to brewers that I've known for a long time, we're all kind of in the same place. We're scratching our heads wondering what the heck is going on? What the heck is next? Am I going to have to diversify? And I think diversification is probably the biggest thing that we're going to be experiencing in craft beer. And what that means, a lot of brewers getting into spirits production, getting into seltzer production, getting into ready to drink cocktail production. And we're doing all of that. And we are hearing from industry experts that if you're not doing that in a few years, you're going to really struggle. Now that's for,
and I assume food as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's for larger breweries. I think the small town, microbrewery, small, 10 barrel system that serves mostly local clientele, I think they'll be okay through this. But I think, we've been seeing it for a few years that the larger breweries that have wide distribution networks are really struggling. And there's a few things that are going on. The increase in local breweries is encouraging people to buy from their local brewery and maybe not buy a national brand anymore. And that's been a big part of it. And now, a lot of the younger drinkers don't like beer. They didn't grow up on beer. They grew up on fruit juices, and they like seltzers and cocktails. And, everything in this alcoholic beverage business is cyclical. Things kind of go up and down. And, I think we're entering a cycle where beer is going to be on the downtrend a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is not what we want.
Well, technically, it's been on a downtrend for some time. I was talking with a historical brewer the other day, and he mentioned that beer sales actually peaked in the 1950s. Believe it or not. It was when we sold the most beer across the board. Now, craft beer obviously a little different, but yeah.
Yeah, the big brewers have definitely seen some pretty significant declines over the past decade or two, and a lot of that was filled by craft, and but craft brewing, the growth rate slowed tremendously, and even though there are more breweries opening up, there also are breweries that are shutting down, and it could be because of economic reasons, or I've heard a lot about lease numbers going up to a point where they're unmanageable, and breweries shutting down, and brewers wanting to retire and just shutting down their business.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it, but retail space has gotten very expensive. Any space has gotten very expensive. Housing costs are through the roof.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, a lot of brewers that were kind of struggling to make it over the last couple of years, if they get hit with a huge rent increase, they're done. So there's a lot of things contributing to it, but there are breweries opening up, and I think there's always going to be a spot for beer in people's homes. At least I hope so. Beer's been around for a long time. I don't think
it's going away. No.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be consolidation in the beer industry with, obviously the big brewers are already, or have for many years, been moving into the craft beer space?
Yeah, I think you're going to see more things like the Canarchy situation, which kind of where Cigar City and Oscar Blues and a couple other breweries joined forces to create one
regional brewery.
And the brands still exist separately. The breweries still are separate, but there's some cross-pollination there that gives you some business advantages. And I think, I think there's going to be more of that kind of stuff happening.
Hmm.
I think the sales of craft breweries to big brewers is slowing down considerably. But I do think brewers are going to start banding together to get some economies of scale and be able to realize more success with fewer people. Honestly.
Well, Mitch, just want to get your closing thoughts on any of the topics we talked about today.
Yeah, drink lagers. It's a really neat development for a lot of us brewers. And there's 2 or 3 breweries that have opened up in Atlanta in the last few years that are almost 100% focused on lager brewing, and they're very popular, which is very encouraging to me. It's keep trying new breweries, and if you like their beer, support them. I think that's what the industry really needs right now is for people to continue to support the small breweries that are out there that are struggling in with everything that's going on.
Well, at least in my area, a lot of the breweries are pretty full right now. Now that things have opened up again, and so I'm happy. I'm encouraged to see people out again.
Yeah,
Good
me
thing.
too.
Yeah.
And we've, as the weather gets nicer, it tends to bring people out and in our doors, which is wonderful.
Well, Mitch, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to come with us today and talk.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. It was fun.
My guest today was Mitch Steele, Chief Operating Officer and Brewmaster at New Realm Brewing. Thanks again, Mitch. Really appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
A big thank you to Mitch Steele for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And also the Brew Commander, the new brewhouse controller from Blickman Engineering. It's available in electric and gas propane models. The patent-pending Brew Commander is a high-quality brewhouse controller that offers automated step mashing, boil timers, precision temperature control, and advanced settings. Command your brew day with the new Brew Commander. To order yours today, visit blickmanengineering.com. Again, that's blickmanengineering.com. And finally, the BeerSmith web version is available now at beersmithrecipes.com. BeerSmith for the web lets you build, edit, and brew recipes from any browser, including your desktop or mobile device. You can try BeerSmith web for 30 days by setting up an account at beersmithrecipes.com. If you purchase a Gold, Platinum, or Pro license, you get both BeerSmith Web and the desktop version of BeerSmith for one low price. Check out beersmithrecipes.com to give it a try today. I'd like to thank you for listening. I hope you have a great brewing week.